They locked her inside a dark shed, then gave her two options, two newborn babies, and a command: choose which one lives. The other, you must kill yourself. She had no weapons, no way out. But what she did next was so unthinkable, so silently bold, that even the soldiers hesitated. She didn't just save a life. She defied the entire system with her bare hands. And no one could understand why she wasn't killed that day. Today, you're going to hear what happened inside that shed. But be warned, this story is not easy to forget. Before we continue, like this video and comment below which city or country you're watching from. This story deserves to be heard around the world. Now take a deep breath and come with me. How does someone become a midwife in hell? They ask me that, always with that tilted look, like they expect me to say it was by choice. But tell me this, who would choose to bring life into a place designed entirely to kill? My name is Stanislava Lesksinska. Before the striped uniform, before the numbers tattooed on my arm, I was a midwife, a wife, a mother, a Polish woman. And when the war broke out, when the Nazis began clearing the streets, burning homes, and turning neighbors into informants, my house became a refuge for Jews, for pregnant women, for the desperate. That was all. Helping. And that's what brought me to Auschwitz. I was arrested along with my two sons and my daughter. The Gestapo didn't care about anyone's children. They threw us onto the train like cattle, surrounded by the stench of fear, sweat, and rusted metal. 3 days later, we arrived at what many called the end of the line, Auschwitz. And if you've heard that name so often it's lost its weight, let me remind you, Auschwitz wasn't a camp. It was the sewer of humanity, a factory of forgetting, a place where time didn't move, it rotted. The gate bore an iron phrase: Arbeit macht free. Work sets you free. A lie. There, we're killed. And death was routine. I remember the first smell. A strange smoke. Sweet. Sticky. Later, I learned it was human flesh, burning in piles inside the crematoriums. They separated us. Children to one side, women to the other. In that moment, we were no longer mother and daughter. No longer siblings. We were numbers. They sent me to Block 24, the women's barack. A damp, dark warehouse filled with lice-infested planks, rats, and the constant sound of coughing, groans, and forced silence. That's where hundreds slept packed like sardines, all facing the same direction. And still, we froze. You learn to sleep with hunger, with fear, with the muffled sobs of a woman beside you who just lost everything. A few days later, she began to scream. But it wasn't like the others. She screamed in pain, but also in urgency. She was in labor. The other prisoners looked at me. They knew. They knew I was a midwife. And in that moment, my story changed. I helped the woman with what I had: dirty rags, muddy water, my hands, and a cracked courage. I knelt on that cold, foul floor. She writhed, cried, but also trusted. And then, the miracle. A cry. Weak horse, but alive. Life. Right in the middle of hell. The next morning, I was summoned by an SS guard. You deliver the baby? Yes. She looked me over like she was inspecting a tool. Then you'll keep doing it. That's how Auschwitz gave me a job. They let me live to help others give birth. Not out of compassion, but because it saved them from doing the dirty work. Do you understand the irony? Me, a midwife, a profession of care, of hope, being used as a tool of control in a slaughterhouse. Most of the babies, they didn't survive. Some were killed at birth. Others left to die from cold or starvation. Many were drowned in buckets. Yes, buckets. And me, I was forced to be there, to hear the mother's screams, to see the spark of a newborn life extinguished in seconds. But some managed to hide them. Small, improvised hiding spots, under straw, between floorboards, behind empty crates. And sometimes, rare but real, the baby went unnoticed. I remember one mother who said to me, "If he lives just 1 hour, that's more than they promised me." Can you grasp the weight of that sentence? Their 1 hour of life was already a victory against the system. I started keeping a kind of secret record, a mental notebook, written with my heart. Names, dates, cries. I wanted to remember. I wanted, if the world ever woke up, for someone to know that there was resistance, that there was birth, Each baby was a scream of defiance. Each cry, a slap in the face of death. The prisoners started calling me mother, not because I was gentle, but because, in that place, I represented something no one else could offer. A chance. A chance to look into another human being's eyes. And remember we were still human. Many nights, I cried alone, when no one could see, because deep down I knew every child I helped bring into the world could be signing a death sentence. But to stop would have meant giving up everything that kept me alive. And that's how I became the midwife of Auschwitz. Not by choice, but by refusal. Refusal to accept that even their life no longer had a place. What's worth more, a baby's life or mine? That question began to eat me from the inside. And it wasn't just philosophical. In Auschwitz, every decision could be your last. One wrong word, one step out of line, one glance that lingered half a second too long. Any of it could cost you your life. Now imagine hiding a baby. Do you know the sound a newborn makes when it's hungry? They don't cry. They whimper. They grow desperate in a silence that cuts like a blade. And every sound was a risk, because the soldiers had no patience. They didn't ask questions. They just kicked down doors toward the child away. And, well, you already know what came next. Even so, some women chose to take the risk. They'd rather die holding their children than watch them die alone. And I understood. More and more, I understood. I began working silently with other prisoners. Women like Helena, a Jewish nurse from Krakow. She could sew. She could improvise bandages with scraps and leaves. And she had that look in her eyes that said, "We're in this together till the end." Together, we built hiding places. They weren't big, but they could fit a baby. At the back of one barack, there was a gap between the floorboards. With a little straw on top, it went unnoticed. Sometimes a newborn spent its first night there. No milk, no arms, but alive. Once we managed to hide a baby for 3 whole days. 3 days. Sounds short? For us, it was an eternity. When we finally slipped him into a group of Polish laborers, a work crew leaving the camp for a factory, I felt something that nearly broke me. Hope. But Auschwitz didn't allow hope for long. 2 days later, Helena disappeared. Just like that. She was summoned to Block 10, the one for medical experiments. We never saw her again, and I knew it was because of me. She was helping me. She knew too much. Have you ever felt guilty for surviving? It's a kind of pain that doesn't bleed but burns from within. Still, I kept going. Maybe out of stubbornness. Maybe out of madness. Or maybe because, deep down, if I stopped, my soul would already be dead. I began writing down the names of the babies I helped deliver on scraps of paper I stole from the infirmary. I hid them between bricks or buried them in old jars. One day I thought, if I die, someone might find them and know that here there was life. But like everything in that place, there wasn't always time to write. One morning, a woman was dragged from the barack. She had given birth the night before. The baby was still nursing when a guard found her. He tore the child from her arms and threw her on the ground. Yes, the ground. She ran to him, dropped to her knees, tried to shield him with her body. They shot her in the head. The baby was crushed, right in front of all of us. And you know what I remember most? The silence that followed. None of us screamed. None of us cried. We just lowered our eyes and buried that pain in a part of our stomachs where no one could see. Because in Auschwitz, crying was dangerous. Showing pain was an invitation for punishment. But the body remembers. The body keeps it. Over time, I began to fall ill. Physically, mentally. I had fevers. I lost weight. But what killed me most was the anger. Anger for being alive while so many others died. Anger for not being able to do more. Anger at God. Yes, even Him. Have you ever prayed in Auschwitz? Have you ever tried to find meaning in a place where mothers bury their own children with bare hands? I tried. I repeated the same words, night after night. Lord, if I cannot change the world, help me not become part of it. Because there was a real risk. The risk of becoming numb, of stopping feeling, of becoming just another cog in a machine. And I refused. I didn't want to be a cog. I wanted to be the crack, the fracture, the wound. One night, a woman called me in secret. Her name was Judith. She was 8 months pregnant, but she had been hiding her belly for weeks. with loose clothes and long silences. She asked me for a favor, one that still hurts to repeat. If they catch me, save the baby. But if you can't kill it before they do. Yes, she would rather I take its life than see it crushed under a soldier's boot. That's the part they don't tell you in war stories. It's not just bullets, tanks, and flags. It's decisions like that. Decisions made by women with no power, no time, no way out. I helped Judith give birth to a little girl. Beautiful, small, with the widest eyes I've ever seen. Judith held her, kissed her forehead, and handed her to me. "It's your turn now," she said. 2 hours later, she was taken away, never returned. The baby? She survived. She was hidden for weeks by a group of brave prisoners. And one day, when the Americans arrived, she was still alive. Yes, some survived. Very few, but they did. And each of those children is a miracle I carry with me to this day. Even if I never saw them again. Even if they don't know who I am. Because sometimes the only recognition life gives you is the fact that it still exists. Have you ever tried to save someone, knowing it might doom everyone around you? That's the question I asked myself every night, lying on that hard wooden shelf, my body aching, my bones louder than the wind, because Auschwitz wasn't just a death camp. It was a place of impossible decisions. And sometimes the cost of a single act of kindness was greater than death itself. By then, dozens of women had passed through my hands. Many I don't remember by name, but I remember their hands, their eyes, their silences. And there was something that always gave me chills. The exact moment when a mother realized her child had no future. It was like her face went blank, like her soul left her body, just for a moment. Once I tried to hide a newborn among scraps of cloth. It was a girl, weak but alive, but she cried, and someone heard. The SS arrived in less than 2 minutes. A guard stormed in, kicked through the floorboards, found the baby. The mother fell to her knees, begged, screamed. He laughed, and smashed the baby's head against the wall. She passed out. I stood frozen, paralyzed, petrified, with warm blood running across the floor, and no one saying a word. After that, I couldn't sleep for nights. At every birth, I trembled, not from cold, from terror. Would this baby be next? Still, I kept going, maybe out of stubbornness, maybe out of cowardice, but more likely because it was the only shred of humanity I had left. By 1944, the camp grew even more chaotic. There were rumors the Russians were advancing. And when fear changes sides, when the executioners start sweating, everything becomes more dangerous, more unpredictable. Executions became more frequent, selections more aggressive, and the medical experiments more brutal. Some of the pregnant women I was helping disappeared overnight. Block 10, always Block 10. That's where Dr. Karl Klauber conducted his sterilization experiments. Torture clinics disguised as science. He injected chemicals into women's wombs, performed surgeries without anesthesia, tortured teenage girls, and claimed it was all for the advancement of German medicine. I will never forget one of the girls they took. Sophia. She was 19, shy, soft-spoken, from a small village, daughter of farmers. When they found out she was pregnant, they put her on a list. I tried to hide her, tried to say it wasn't true, but they knew. They always knew. She was taken, and came back 3 days later, or rather, a shadow of her did. She walked like a ghost, didn't speak, and one night, she hanged herself with her own scarf. Auschwitz didn't just kill with bullets. It killed with fear, with silence, with impossible choices that tore people apart from the inside. There was a day I was nearly caught. A baby had survived over a week in hiding. The mother, a Romani woman named Alanka, was skilled. She had sewn a makeshift wrap to breastfeed in secret. But someone informed. 2 guards stormed in while I was doing rounds in the barack. They began yelling, searching. Alanka looked at me in panic and did the unthinkable. She threw the baby at me, quick, desperate, while they dragged her away by the hair. I slipped out the back, ducked into the latrine, and hid there with the child in my arms, covered in filth, urine, and shame. I stayed there for hours. Hours. The baby whimpered softly. I trembled nonstop, certain they would come any second. But they didn't. Alanka died that same day. And the baby? I placed him in an old basket and left him inside a waste cart leaving the camp. I never found out what happened to him, but I want to believe he lived. You may think that's naive, but sometimes hope is the only thing keeping you from losing your mind. Over time, I started keeping a mental list, a kind of inventory of resistance, not of weapons, not of escapes, but of births. I estimate that during my time in Auschwitz, more than 3,000 pregnant women passed through the camp. Of those, I personally assisted around 1,500. Do you know how many babies survived? Few, very few, maybe 3 or 4 dozen. But each of them is a spark, a flash inside the darkness. And me? I kept going. I would wake up, wash my hands with snow, kneel on the filthy floor, and help bring another life into the world, even if just for minutes. Many times, I would whisper to the newborn, "You are an answer, a living answer in a place that only knows death." And even if no one saw, even if no one knew, I knew, and that was enough. And when hell begins to collapse, what's left of us? In early 1945, something began to change. No one told us anything, of course, but we could feel it. The guards looked more tense. The prisoner marches increased, and suddenly, distant sounds like metallic thunder. Cannons. They said the Russians were coming, that the empire of death was about to fall. But have you ever been imprisoned so long that freedom starts to feel like a myth? That's how it was. We heard rumors, but we didn't believe them. Meanwhile, I kept delivering babies, even as the camp collapsed, even with no food, even with corpses piled around the barack. One of the last women I helped was named Miriam, 7 months pregnant, skin and bones, eyes sunken, hands trembling endlessly. She held my hand and said, "If I don't make it, promise me you'll take care of him." And I lied. I told her yes. But the truth? I could barely take care of myself. That night, the birth was silent. No screams, no strength, just a faint cry. The baby was born, and Miriam died minutes later. I sat there, holding that child, a newborn surrounded by rats, cold, and death. And then I thought, maybe this is the last one, the last baby Auschwitz will ever see. The next morning, strange movement swept through the camp. Running, guards shouting in German, gunshots in the distance. Someone whispered, "They're fleeing." Yes, the Nazis began burning documents, destroying evidence, evacuating camps. Some prisoners were forced into what they called the death marches. Others, like me, were left behind. For 2 days, we didn't know if death would come by bullet, hunger, or cold. I stayed busy, washed cloths, tried to feed the baby with wet crumbs of bread. I wanted to make time move. Wanted, somehow, to keep him alive, right there if there was even a chance. And then, on the 3rd day, silence. No yelling, no barking dogs, no soldiers' footsteps, nothing. And then, a sound I never thought I'd hear again. Engines, but not Nazi engines. Soviet tanks, and voices. Rougher, but not threatening. I didn't get up to greet them, didn't run, didn't shout. I just cried, because in that moment, I realized I was still alive. And the baby in my arms was too. The Soviets entered like ghostly liberators. No flowers, no speeches, just weapons, muddy boots, and exhausted stares. But they had something more. They didn't want us dead. They were the first to see what had been done to us. They found the corpses, the chambers, the rotting barracks. And for the first time, the story began to come out of the darkness. In the days that followed, I offered to help, organize prisoners, treat wounds, feed the children. But something inside me had already broken. I had done my part, everything I could, and more. A few weeks later, we were relocated to makeshift hospitals, refugee camps. There, I found my son again. Yes, one of my sons had survived. When he saw me, he couldn't believe it. He said he thought I was dead. I didn't answer. I just hugged him. And then, in a quiet corner of the infirmary, I heard a cry. Faint, but familiar. I went toward the sound and saw the baby. That baby, he was alive, and he smiled. That was the first time in 2 years that I smiled back. They wanted no one to remember, so I decided I would never forget. Returning home wasn't how I imagined. People talked about the war like a storm that had passed. But no one spoke of the mud it left in our bones. They wanted to move on, to rebuild, to forget. But me? How do you forget? How do you look at a child playing in the yard and not remember the ones you saw die before they ever opened their eyes? How do you walk down the clean streets of lots and not see the shadows of the tracks, the dogs, the piles of bodies? I returned to my house, or what was left of it, broken windows, cracked walls, and a silence louder than any scream. My husband, miraculously, was still alive. I embraced him like someone trying to re-enter the world. But there was an ocean between us, because he had never been there. He never saw what I saw, and still, he listened to me. At first, I didn't want to speak. But one day, I picked up a blank sheet of paper, and I began. I wrote down every name I could remember, every date, every mother, every baby. It was my testimony, my way of resisting the Nazis' attempt to erase everything. I call that notebook the report of the midwife of Auschwitz. And for a long time, no one wanted to hear it. The authorities said it was too emotional, that it didn't fit the official records. But I knew, if no one remembered, then they had one. Years later, I received a letter from a young man in Germany. It read, "My grandmother always told me she was born in a camp, that someone saved her. Today, I found out that person was you." And I cried, because for one brief moment, it was all worth it. One life, just one. That same week, 2 more letters arrived, and then more. Some included photos, adult faces, smiles, families, the fruit of an improbable miracle, born in mud, blood, and darkness. And do you know what moves me the most? They don't call me a hero. They call me Aunt, the godmother of hope, part of the miracle. I never wanted medals. I just wanted the world to know that there was life. Yes, there was life in Auschwitz. There was resistance. Not with weapons, but with gestures, with hands that held, with eyes that could still see beauty in the midst of horror. For years, I kept working as a midwife. Thousands of births, thousands of cries, but none ever as loud as that first one, the one that pierced through the silence of the camp, the one that reminded me that the very act of being born is already an act of rebellion. Today, old, with wrinkled hands and eyes that have seen far too much, I still close my eyes and return there. Back to the Barak, to the filthy cloths, to the women looking at me with fear and faith, to the muffled sound of that first cry. And I think I wasn't the one who saved lives. It was those children who saved me. Because, in the end, what saves us is not surviving. It's refusing to let death teach us how to live without a soul.